Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY.
WBNY Buffalo.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of 91.3 FM WBNY, the United Students Government at Buffalo State, or Buffalo State itself. Due to the opinionated nature of these programs, listener discretion is highly advised. If you have any questions or comments about today's program, you can give us a call at 716-878-5104.
To join Mr. Hare on today's Living for the People, dial 878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. Or go to facebook.com/91.3 WBNY and comment there. That's facebook.com/91.3 WBNY. Courtesy Breitbart.
All right, welcome to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host here for this next hour. Welcome you to our broadcast, focused on providing insight into events shaping our national and regional world, and examining the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. We really hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're here with Norm MacArthur, who is our citizen and our audience of one. Welcome, Norm.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Hare. Thank you, sir.
Norm gives us some feedback, on what the citizens think about the things that we're talking about in this spot. And of course, we're here with our citizen of the 21st century, Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan Hare.
And of course, I'm the one that brings you all of this noise. So today, I want to open up, and don't let me get away without talking a little bit about your cousin. I know you all don't like these cousins that you have, right? But you have a lot of cousins. The one down in Florida, Ron DeSantis. I don't want to close the program until we talk a little bit about him.
Ronnie D.
Ronnie D. Right, Ronnie D. Ron D. Right. But before we get there, I labeled the first part of the program, Republicans' subtle appeals to the race and class biases of the Trump base will divide and eventually destroy America's democracy. Now, I know that's a big chunk of something to say, but it's important that you understand the precipice that we are standing on. As we've been talking about, Norm, we've been talking about this for quite a while, that we have a faction of people in this country, you call them Republicans, that are using the actual policies and procedures of democracy,
yes, sir,
to destroy democracy.
Mm-hmm.
They are attacking democracy with democracy. What do I mean by that? If you have a situation where in your county, you have Republican control over the county legislature, so you can control what new laws get passed or laws get rescinded in your area, and you use your control over the county legislature for you to make it really impossible for significant chunks of people to be able to vote, take away their drop boxes, take away their early voting, make them have to produce documents that they probably haven't had since they were born, and so on. You can do things to marginalize people's ability to vote so that the voting population is not the population of the people that live in your county. It's the population of people who are actually able to get into the pool of being voters.
Yeah.
If you can reduce that population to just your kind of voter, then your kind of voter will help you to vote for new things, that may say things like, well, you haven't voted in 2 years. You don't feel like an American to me. I'm taking your registration away.
Craziness.
Right? We had a situation we talked about last week where somebody, a body of people in Erie County, to bring it home,
Oh yeah.
in a village in Erie County. We had a conservative party chairperson complain and actually went to court and is still in court trying to overturn the votes of 69 people in, I won't go into the city, but the little township. Wants to overturn 69 of their votes on the basis that they should not have voted in the Conservative Party. So when they asked, well, why shouldn't they have been able to vote in the Conservative Party? He says, well, they used to be Republicans. But, a half a year ago, they changed their registrations to conservative so they could vote in the conservative primary and they could control or influence who would wind up being the nominee for whatever it was, county executive, whatever the race was, who would be the nominee from the Conservative Party. That's not illegal. You can change your registration, and you can change your registration for a reason that somebody might not like.
Right.
If I decide that, I need to roll with the Republicans in order to have some influence, on who the people are that get nominated by the Republican Party, it marginalizes my ability to affect Democratic Party politics, but it increases my ability to affect Republican Party politics. Yeah. And if that's what I think I need to do to defend my interests, I have every right to do that. It's not like I cheated, but this Conservative Party chairperson actually argued out loud that these 69 people used to be Republicans, that they registered in time to become Conservative Party members, and then voted in the Conservative primary, and they elected somebody to be the nominee that his party, the Conservative Party, didn't want. Well, that's what's called a nasty break. Life just didn't work out for you this time, right? But he's in court trying to have the votes of 69 people overturned. Now, ask yourself this question. Even if you agree with this Conservative Party person, maybe you're in that body of people that don't care much about, the law. But if this were to go down, if the courts were to rule that it was okay to invalidate the votes of these 69 people, what precipice does that leave us on going forward? Does that mean every time somebody doesn't like who becomes the nominee of their party, they can go to court and have the votes of actual American citizens thrown aside?
Yeah.
Or this Conservative Party chairperson said, if you can't throw the votes aside, then throw the election aside.
Yeah.
And let's just have a new election.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, Mr. Hare, the Republicans are coming up with, and I mean, it's in every situation, just like you said, when they had the majority, doesn't matter, what level of voting that we're at, legislature, but they're utilizing this Trump philosophy.
Any place they have the majority, they will use that majority to write rules that favor them, that disfavor other people.
Yeah.
And they literally are eroding democracy.
Yeah.
And so this is the precipice that we're on. And I want to show you how this plays out in other contexts. An article written in NPR, the National Public Radio, looks at a study on what motivates Trump supporters. They were just trying to understand why are these people so animated about Donald Trump? What's the attraction? So here's what occurred. Now, they've been at this for a while. They didn't start doing this a couple of days ago. They started this study in 2011. That's literally 8 years ago, right? A discussion convened by NPR seeking to understand what motivates these Trump voters made this assessment. They said a recent study published in the American Political Science Review found that animus, in other words, hatred, towards Democratic-linked minority groups. I'm real confused about that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But Democratic-linked minority groups, because I thought I was just linked with me because I'm an African person. So I'm linked with me. This linked with the Democratic Party, you said that. Now, I may vote more Democratic than I vote Republican because the people in the Democratic Party are being less hostile towards me than the people in the Republican Party. But I'm not really a fan of anybody who's not trying to help me, that's not trying to support, my ability to participate in the American democracy. So I'm really on my side.
That's right.
I'm not on the Democratic link side, but that's what the article said. So it says, this American Political Science Review found that animus towards Democratic-linked minority groups in 2011, and then he names the Democratic-linked minority groups, African Americans and Muslims, is a strong, not anybody else, was a strong predictor of Trump's support in later years. The study is called the Activating Animus Report, the Uniquely Social Roots of Trump's Support. And this was authored by, partly authored by Liliana Mason. She was one of, I think, 3 authors of this study. She's a political scientist at Johns Hopkins University. The study, she says, was premised on the idea that you could identify the kind of American who would be looking for someone like Donald Trump to be their leader. I think that's an important question. When Donald Trump came down the escalator, what was his background? Had he ever run political office before?
No, sir.
Had he ever held any elected office before?
No.
Had he ever even been appointed to an executive or legislative position in his life before? Had he ever even said that he knew anything at all about how to govern a country, about governance, about political, a structure, a government protocol? Anything? Did he know anything? Did he even know that? Do we even know if he knew how to read?
He was just a corrupt businessman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a good question.
Yeah.
What motivates somebody to vote for somebody like him, who has no resume for you to vote for or against in the first place? So she says this unique study began in 2011. They interviewed a number of people. They didn't tell us how many people they interviewed. They identified the demographic characteristics of these people that they interviewed and their responses to the interview questions. They then re-interviewed these same people in 2018, 8 years later. All of the respondents were interviewed before the emergence of Donald Trump in 2015. These people were originally interviewed in 2011. The researchers wanted to see if Donald Trump's supporters were people who were cognitively looking to rally around someone like Donald Trump, or whether it was Trump who drew these people's attention and were drawn to him. Now, I want you to understand the distinction of what's being said there.
Explain that clearly. Yeah.
So somebody who's cognitively looking for somebody like Donald Trump is like, you remember David Duke, the person, the Klan wizard who became a congressperson?
Yes, sir.
Well, the people that voted for him were looking for somebody like him to vote for. The people that voted for him weren't people that were convinced, by something that David Duke did, were convinced, well, we should support David Duke because he's on our side, he's our guy. They weren't convinced or persuaded to be David Duke's supporters. When they came and got through the nomination process, the supporters went to David Duke because David Duke was a person who was solidly behind the things that Duke's supporters were behind.
Like-mindedly.
Right. I mean, they were murderers. They were rapists. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That slipped.
No, that's what I needed. I needed to know what you was talking about, because I'm like, behind what? No, these are people that know, okay, we need somebody who's going to get the job done. We don't care how they do it. They line up with, I'm a racist, they're racist, I'm prejudiced, I will do anything, criminal thing to get my outcome, to serve my need. That's the person I need. I don't need somebody who's politically correct, or I need somebody who's going to be effective to get my needs done.
I mean, you might be somebody in the Democratic Party who is on my side. You might be a boll weevil, Democrat and whatnot, right? But because you're on the Democratic side, you tend to vote with most of the Democrats most of the time.
Right.
I can't vote for you, even though
Right.
I like you because you wear a Ku Klux Klan hat under your shawl, right?
Wow.
But so I might like you, but I can't vote for you.
Right.
But I can vote for David Duke because David Duke I know is going to be the guy that's going to vote for the things and push for the things that I want.
Right.
He's my guy.
Right.
Well, that's why. Well, that's the distinction that they were trying to figure out was going on in this study. Is it that there was a body of people that were racially animated, who were looking for somebody who would carry the torch for their set of policies, what they wanted, or was Donald Trump somebody who had like all this light coming out of his head, like Moses with the horns, right? All this light coming out of his head, and attracted these people, and they were drawn to him, sort of sold on him, which was the situation. Now I know this may be a distinction that some people may feel is a distinction without a difference, but there really is a difference between the two. If you were persuaded to Donald Trump, you could be dissuaded to Donald Trump. You know what I mean?
Right.
You could come back and look at this and say, gosh, 91 felonies?
Right.
He was lying about, he was a billionaire, he really wasn't.
Right.
He actually put his hands in a woman's pants he in a department store in public. Are you kidding me? That's the guy that we voted for to be president.
But see, that's the thing. Those voters knew who Trump was. They knew that he was nasty. They knew that.
Right. So my point is that the people that were looking for somebody like Trump, they're who Willie's talking about. They didn't care about where you put your hands and all that sort of stuff, right? But the people who were sort of persuaded to go Trump's way, those people could be dissuaded and persuaded to do something else because it was not their core being to be in Trump's camp. They just got drawn because, maybe they were thinking, well, man, maybe it's not fair. You gave this black guy a shot, at being able to student at Yale. I could have had that shot.
Right.
I'm white,
Absolutely.
and so on. Right now, the fact that you've been denying black people the ability to go to Yale and Colgate and Harvard and whatever these Ivy League schools, Penn and so on, you've been denying them the ability to attend these schools for all these years. Just think of it as 15% of all of the people that have attended Ivy League schools, 200 Ivy League schools, over the course of the past 150 years. 15% of those seats, if we were talking about just general demographic fairness, if all things being equal, you would see the same number of people in the enrolled population at these schools as you see as were a percentage of the population of the country. So if 15% of the people in the country were African Americans, you would see over time that you'd have something in the area of 15%, sometimes 12%, sometimes 18%. But, you would see some pretty close parallel between your percentage of the population and your percentage of the enrolled population in these schools. If you did that, you would be talking about tens of thousands of people that were denied, African people, that were denied the ability to attend Harvard and Yale and these other kind of universities. Who makes up that ground? Who makes up that unfairness? How does that get redressed? Obviously, you would have to have some measure, some processes and procedures that would allow African people who have been denied to now have an opportunity.
I believe it was taken away from us just recently.
Well, that's where we are right now, right? That's where we are.
Yep.
So the authors of this study concluded that the belief that Trump somehow created a whole bunch of hatred in American politics doesn't really seem to be the reality. They say that what this study data shows is that what Trump did was served as to be a place where people who already held a lot of animus towards marginalized groups could gather around him. In other words, we're racist. We despise people. Who who can we go that can carry the torch for us? Donald Trump, he's coming down the escalator. Look at him. He's got his anti-everybody. He says that Mexicans have watermelons for legs.
He's perfect.
He's just us.
He's perfect. That's the man. That's
So
perfect.
this is the study. It says it's not necessarily that it's the Republican Party that is creating animus towards people. I'm not sure that I buy that, but that's what
Well,
that's what the study
some of them
says.
is in that crowd. Not
Right,
all of them, but
right.
some of them is in that.
But that's what they're asserting, that it's not necessarily that it's the Republican Party that is creating animus towards people. The study says, or the authors say, that there's this faction of Americans who really dislike marginalized groups, and they're attracted to one party or the other based on the sort of decisions that party tends to make. They're able to kind of hide within the party in order to make the American politics be more focused on the party and not focused on this faction of people. But the faction of people that we're talking about are Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, James Comer, the people that we have seen, what's his name, from Texas, the senator from Texas. See how these names get away from me as I get to roll it. It'll come back to me. His face is in front of me. He's the one that ran to Cancun when they had the ice freeze in Texas. Everybody was being frozen in Texas. He ran to Cancun with his kids, and then he blamed it on his kids. He said, "Oh, my daughter made the arrangements for this trip. A few weeks ago, before we even knew about the weather event. What's his name? It'll come to me. Anyway, the authors tried to determine, did this study that show that Trump voters' animus itself is uniquely high, or simply that it uniquely drives their votes, or both. I think it's both, but they said the study found that it uniquely draws the animus that these people have, uniquely draws them towards Trump. And so when they controlled for partisanship, in other words, votes that were just based on loyalty to your party, they found that people in 2011 who have negative views of these particular groups are much more likely to approve of Trump in 2018. They're not any more likely to approve of the Republican Party, or to approve of Mitch McConnell, or to approve of former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. In other words, if you controlled for, say, Speaker Paul Ryan, and say in 2011, how'd you feel about him? Was he your guy? And now in 2018, how do you feel about him? Is he still your guy? There was no change in their sentiment towards him. No change in their sentiment towards Mitch McConnell. No change in their sentiment towards the Republican Party. But if you ask them in 2011 how you feel about the folks that most reflect how you feel about these groups that you can't stand in 2011, then ask those same people the same question in 2018. I couldn't stand them in 2011, and I can't stand them now. In fact, I can't stand them worse now than I felt in 2011. Now, that's me adding my words to the study. Okay, right.
Feel you, Mr. Hare.
But the study looked at respondents' feelings towards whites and Christians, an interesting piece of the study. Whites and Christians are groups that are typically associated with the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And what they found is that any hatred that respondents had in 2011 towards whites or Christians had no effect on their approval of the Democratic Party or of a number of Democratic Party officials in 2018. So that relationship, in other words, what they're saying is, if you were driven by your animus towards these marginalized groups, in other words, people of color, in other words, black people, mm-hmm. if you were driven by that, that's what motivates you, that's what grinds in your heart, mm-hmm. right? You would go find the Republicans who had the same kind of attitude. And the Republicans who didn't have that attitude, you didn't have any feelings for them one way or the other. Nothing changed.
Okay.
But you know what, Mr. Hare? Let me just say, we're talking about whites and Christians, mm-hmm. and having this particular animus, towards these particular groups, But the thing about it is, it's a huge disparity. If you are a white Christian, and if you are a true Christian, a Christian is somebody who strives to be like Christ. You shouldn't have any animus towards anybody.
Well,
being in that particular way.
They got different rules. See, you keep trying to read the Bible the way your preacher read the Bible to you. See, and what I'm saying is you got to read the Bible the way that the racists read the Bible. Okay?
I mean,
remember, all of the slaveholders, every single one of them was a Christian.
That's the point.
Every one of them.
Absolutely.
Okay? Every one of them held services on their plantation campuses.
And that scripture that they will push, serve your masters.
Slaves, that's right. Serve your masters.
Serve your masters.
Right? And they ran that game all day, in and out, over and over and over again. So let's not go down that Christian road.
Okay? I respect what you say.
Right. See, so what they're saying here is that the faction that was identified in this study, they are people who, if you were for whites or for Christians, or you were against whites or against Christians, their issue with you is, how should I say this the right way? Their issue towards you is, if you were for or against white or Christian, that was not motivating you. Okay? One way, in other words, if you were already motivated to be for white, you stayed for white. If you're already motivated to be against white, you'd stay against white. But that's not what's driving the people to become Trump supporters. What drives people to become Trump supporters is, if you are going to be somebody who's going to act on helping us to have supremacy over everybody else in this country,
privilege,
you can get my vote.
Privilege.
So the point being made here is, the media has been giving us the idea that Donald Trump is some sort of Pied Piper. He's out here trumpeting these race tunes, and there's all of these people in the country lining up behind him because they're attracted to the song. What the study says is that that's just not true. What really is true is that all those people you see lining up behind Donald Trump, they were already lined up.
Right.
Yeah.
They just didn't have a Donald Trump to line up behind.
They had a preconceived idea already.
So when Donnie showed up on the escalator,
that's the man.
We've been looking for you for months,
That's the man.
Where you been?
That's why they was willing to go out and take over the White House and everything.
So he can commit crime on top of crime on top of crime, and you get no blowback from them because they don't care about the crimes.
Right.
All they care about is that Donnie's in our corner to help us to punish and to oppress and suppress these, what they're calling in the study, marginalized groups.
You got it,
You
Mr.
and I know
Hare.
that they're talking about black people.
Yeah.
You got it, Mr. Hare.
When you I'm sorry. Will.
No. I'm just
No. I was just going to say, when you look at it, these so-called marginalized groups, really, and I'm just talking about people of color. They don't want to see us coming to get the crown. See, we are a people that is on the rise. Anytime we intermingle or intermix, you're going to get somebody black. Either way it comes out.
If there was any ounce of fairness, see, because you all aren't old enough to remember this, and to be honest with you, I'm not old enough to remember this either. But in 1866, a month after the Reconstruction so-called period began, which I'm going to introduce to you all today a concept. There's no such thing as the Reconstruction period. There was the deconstruction period. It was deconstruction because they used that 10-year period to deconstruct the power of the plantation owners in the South, because they were in the way of the North. The North fought that war because the South was in the way of the North's development of the industrialized economy of this country.
I gotcha.
The South refused to yield. If the South had just been willing to yield just a little bit, there'd never been a civil war.
And we might have still been in a predicament.
You'd still be enslaved. You'd still be enslaved to this
some
day.
type of way.
So don't let this northern stuff, like, there was the angels in the north and there was the demons in the south. There was demons all over this country. Okay, so it's important to understand that's what the Reconstruction period was about. But the point I'm making is that they were electing people, to become senators. African people became senators and county executives and state, assemblymen and state senators and so on. Mm-hmm. That all was happening, right? We had an African person become a governor in one of the southern states.
Mr. Hare, we never ever, and I think that this might be a good show to bring it up, but we never hear those names of these African Americans that have became senators and governors.
It's a long list of names.
Okay.
But we never hear them. Why we don't never hear them, though?
Because they stuck a sword right through their heart 10 years after the beginning of the so-called Reconstruction period, and they carved out these people from the political process. They said, okay, it's okay now. We got control over, the economic infrastructure of the South. You Southern, haters, you can go back to controlling the politics in the South again. Mm. And when they did that, they essentially fired all of those Republican senators, black Republican senators, black Republican congressmen, black mayors, black state senators, black state assemblymen. They basically just fired all those people. Places that had 100% of their population were black, of their voting district was black. Mm-hmm. They voted in white people. They had white. There's not a single white voter in the entire jurisdiction, and yet they voted in a white person to represent that district.
Wasn't an ounce of democracy in that time.
So I want to be clear about that, right? Yeah. This assertion that some morally minded, centered, Caucasian American people, were in control of the North, and that they were trying to to infect the South with their, moral superiority, that simply isn't true. When they got control of the infrastructure of the South, they then allowed those race-oriented whites in the South to have complete control over the process again. And they put all of these African people back behind the 8 ball again. So this is where we are today, so that we understand what's going on. The Republicans are using every spot they can find in this country where they have the majority of the votes that govern a particular process or jurisdiction or whatever, and they're using that capacity to have the majority vote to change the rules so that you don't have as much democracy for certain populations of people that you had before.
So, Mr. Hare, what you are saying is, it's not about Trump. Trump is just some kind of key figure. It's about control,
right?
Supremacy, privilege,
right?
White privilege,
right? See, and the reason why it's taking on the shape that it's taking on today, and it seems to be so entrenched and being magnified, becoming so much bigger, this momentum, is because something has happened that hadn't happened before.
Black president.
In 2008, Willie elected a black president of the United States. If Willie had stayed home and didn't vote for that guy, we wouldn't have all of this backlash going on in the country right now. Right. So blame Willie.
Right. And I know the atmosphere, like white, because I used to attend some white churches and just deal, and the atmosphere was, the world is over. A black president is over. Right. That's how they felt.
Right. Even though that black president literally saved this country, saved the economy, saved the health, and so on of this country. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it happened once. They know we're coming, and hey,
no, it's not mystery for them. It's mystery for you, but for them, they say, well, just look at the tea leaves. There's a black woman who's the vice president of the United States.
Right.
As soon as this 81-year-old man turns 84, she's going to wind up being the president of the United States.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, I'm being ugly, but that's the reality, right? Yeah. So what they've been concerned about, that the country's going to flip over and the non-white people in this country are going to wind up becoming, the governing
Minorities.
ruling class of this country,
Yeah.
their position is that has already occurred, that we're already in that space, and now they're fighting to take their space back. That's
Right.
what this is really all
Right.
about.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we don't call something what it is, we keep calling it what it's not,
Right.
we're not going to actually face the right problem, and therefore we're
That's
not going to
correct.
solve the
That's
right
correct.
problem.
Yeah.
Listen, we got to take a quick break and talk to our sponsors. Hope they won't be too mad at me with what I had to say. And we will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY.
They are our love bugs and companions. They are our pets, our family, and they make life better. When we face unexpected challenges, so do our pets. That's why we're on a mission to support people and their pets. Whether donating a bag of kibble, sharing an Instagram post of a lost cat, or welcoming a foster pet into your home, every bit of kindness counts. Visit petsandpeopletogether.org to learn how to be a helper in your community. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
91.3 FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism,
Is the NRA imploding?
providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. All right, welcome back to Living for the People. This is L. Nathan here, your host. We're here with Norm McCarthy, who is our in-studio audience of one. Welcome back, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Hare.
And we're also here with Willie H., who does the live streaming of the program. Welcome back, Willie.
Welcome, everybody, to Living for the People with L. Nathan here. Call in, guys, 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104.
And I hope I'm not shocking everybody, but I'm just trying to help us. Sometimes you have to grab people by the collar, you know what I mean? And you got to shake them to get them to understand what's really going on, right?
Yeah.
And to accept what's really going on.
And I think you're really sharing that today, Mr. Hare. Like, yeah, Trump, but it's really not a Trump thing. It's something else.
Yep. That doesn't mean that you should vote for Trump. You should still
Right.
You vote against him 3 times.
Right.
Okay.
He's like that. He's the car or the thing that they're using to.
He's the vehicle.
that they're using.
So let me read something to you, okay? Because I want to postulate this question: do Americans really believe the Constitution? Do Americans really believe the Constitution, or do the Americans just say we have a Constitution,
right?
And that's as far as they go with it. They don't even read the thing again.
That's what it seems like, Mr. Hare.
Here's what the Constitution says. That document, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, quote, prohibits anyone who has previously taken an oath of office, whoops, where'd you go? Don't go away, who has previously taken an oath of office, i.e. most current and former public officials, that prohibits anyone who has previously taken an oath of office from holding public office if they have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States of America.
Wow. So, with that being said, when Mr. Trump is found guilty on all counts, according to the Constitution, he should not hold office at all.
So I would assert that until he's found guilty, he's not bound by this provision. But if he is found guilty of insurrection,
right?
If he is found guilty of sedition,
yes, sir,
if he is found guilty of conspiring with other people to engage in actions of insurrection against the United States,
Go ahead, sir.
he cannot hold office. Let me talk about running for office. That's not what it says.
Okay.
You can run as far as you want. You can run
Yeah.
from here to Pluto if that's
All
what
right.
you want to do, but you can't hold the office.
But what if he runs and wins?
No, you can run. You can win the election,
Okay.
but you still can't sit in that office.
So at this point, now see, this is what I've been asking.
You're
for
going
the
to become.
longest.
You're going to become the elected unpresident of the United States.
Now this is what I want to. Now this is powerful right here. I mean, I'm sitting here hearing this
From a constitutional perspective,
from that standpoint.
we are in a new zone. And the reason why we're in this new zone is because the people who wrote the Constitution never envisioned the idea that Americans would actually turn against Americans
Right.
and actually conspire to overthrow Americans in America. They had not envisioned that. When they wrote this provision, this was being written immediately after the Civil War. So you had all of these Southern seditionists, Southern traitors and whatnot, right, that made up the South. You had all of them who now said, well, we want to be back with the United States again. We want to rejoin the Union.
Yeah.
Well, how can we trust you to rejoin the Union when you're the ones who we killed 600,000 people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, how can we trust you with anything?
Yeah.
So they wrote this provision, this amendment, to prevent those people from ever holding office in the country again. That made sense.
Yes, sir.
But the way that this was written, it didn't say only those people that turned on the country in the Civil War. They said anybody who was involved in any kind of insurrection against the United States loses their ability to sit in any office held by the United States, period.
Okay, Mr. Hare. So with this being the case, and us knowing this, and I know that when we speak of the media has heard about this before. You just presented you just presented it to us, but the media. So how can, in good faith, good conscience, American citizens even have a second thought at going with Trump? How can if you are a believer in our democracy, there's no way that he should even. How could he even?
Because
run?
the people that support Trump feel that the America that they were overturning, that they were insurrecting against, was an illegitimate America. And their test, their proof, Willie talked about this a few minutes ago. The proof that it was an illegitimate America is in 2008, they elected this guy with this funny name, Barack Hussein Obama.
Right.
That proved that that's not the America that we were all thought ourselves to be a part of.
Right.
So a illegitimate America had come into existence, so they don't feel that the 14th Amendment binds them because they weren't resisting America. They're resisting the illegal or illicit America.
Right.
That's how they see the world.
Right.
The problem is if Americans as a whole, if the majority of Americans do not act on the 14th Amendment and prevent this criminal and his agents from being able to gain power in this country, not only him, but his henchmen, ever again in this country. If they don't do that, we set in motion the reality that 4 years from now, in 2028, you'll have people running for office saying, I'm a much better insurrectionist than those guys were. They lost. You get me, we're going to win. You know what I mean?
Hey, Mr. Hare, I don't want to ever put you in any danger or anything. But we should set you up for an infomercial or something, because this right here, this is something that needs to be circulated. It needs
really
to be.
does.
I don't know how many people don't. There's so many people there ain't many people that read the Constitution and really know what it really represents and says.
People have begun to talk. We talked about this several months ago, but it's coming to the fore in the last month or so. People are starting to talk about this, but they're not talking about it, in my view, the way it needs to be talked about.
Right.
You have to help people to understand what the consequences are if you don't honor your own word. We didn't ask you to do this. You asked you to do this. We didn't write the 14th Amendment. We weren't even born when the 14th Amendment was written. You wrote the 14th Amendment because you knew what it was you were afraid of,
Right.
what you were concerned of happening in the United States. Well, now the thing that you were concerned about has happened. The very thing you wrote this amendment to do something about, that very thing has happened in this country. Insurrection has happened in the United States. It's happened on a bunch of levels. It's still happening right now. If you do not confront this and call these people out for what they are, insurrectionists, traitorous people who do not belong in any governing position of the United States forever. I'm not even sure their children should be allowed to vote. I mean, we can talk about that, but these people should never be allowed to hold office again. If the United States does not stand behind this amendment, we are in a world of trouble.
Yeah.
We're in a world of trouble as it is. We've allowed
Right.
these people to change election laws, to bias these laws towards one people against another people, and not done anything about it.
Yeah.
You know, we've created the conditions that made the insurrection possible in this country.
Yeah.
At some point, we have to turn around.
Well,
We have to change. Go ahead.
like we always say, and you know, I'm starting to see it. You know, it's coming to light. If this did happen, a precedent would be set, and I don't know how much longer we could continue to go this way, and for there not to be a total change in our democracy. I mean, we'd really be really messed up, Mr. Hare. I'm just
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we only got about 15 minutes. I need to talk a little bit about your cousin. I know you trying to skate on me on that. Just a little bit on Ukraine. That the thing that's irritating me about this Ukrainian situation, not with the Ukrainians themselves, they're doing what they're supposed to do. This is a small country. It's got a lot of land mass, but there's only maybe 20 or so million people that live, 25 million people that live in Ukraine. This is not a big country. They had to take on a country that's got something like 300 million people living in it, a massive country that has all kinds of armament, oil, all kinds of stuff, right? And they've been rumbling against these people.
Yeah.
And they've been doing better than just holding their own. They've actually gained ground, from these people.
Did you? Well, I'm sure you've heard, but I was watching the news the other day. I heard Pedrosin passed. I mean, he was killed in the airplane.
Right. Right.
So I mean, you know.
So we know what probably happened to him, right?
Well, that's what they were talking. They were talking about Putin had him taken out by a bomb or something.
But that's not the issue, because Petrosian was not. If anything, he was an enemy to Ukraine as well.
What was the name of the group that he led?
The Wagner Group.
The Wagner Group. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Petrosian was not a friend of Ukraine. He was a friend of Putin's forces and whatnot. So him falling is not something that was a boon or a slight to the Ukraine. That's like sort of a side issue.
Mm-hmm.
The main issue for Ukraine is that these are people that didn't manufacture, a large number of weapons. They don't make, Abrams tanks, and that sort of stuff, right? So to go to war against Russia, you need a lot of military infrastructure and hardware.
Yeah.
So they had to get that stuff from other people. What you see in the American media, and particularly the Republicans using the American media, is to assert that if the Ukrainians are not winning, they're not showing big gains, in taking back territory from the Republicans and breaking the back from the Russians and breaking the back of the Russians. If they're not showing that, then their position seems to be, well, then we should stop spending all of this money, defending the Ukraine. Now, I realize the United States has spent probably something in the excess of $50 billion on Ukraine so far, and they got another $15 or $16 billion they've requested for additional aid for Ukraine. I understand it's a lot of money for the United States to spend, But I need for us to understand this in context. Because if you don't understand it in context, you don't really understand where the value position has to be for the United States. If the United States allows Ukraine to fall, allows Russia to just walk over to another country and snatch that country and make it a part of Russia, they allow that to occur and don't do anything about it. The same thing is going to happen to Lithuania. The same thing is going to happen to Belarusia. The same thing is going to happen to Soviet Georgia, or it's not Soviet Georgia anymore, but Georgia, and so on. All those countries that are border countries to Russia are all under threat if this thing with Ukraine is allowed to continue. Poland is a border country of Russia. They would be under threat that Russia could do the same thing to them.
Yeah.
How would you feel? How would the American public feel if Russia invaded Poland?
Yeah.
Would you feel like, well, they're over there and we're over here, and we got to do. We've got poor people over here. We got to take care of.
We have to stop Russia at some point, and we cannot allow them to strategically attack different countries around where they are. They'll become stronger, and sooner or later, they'll come for us.
Right. Well, Russia wants to recreate the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
The Soviet Union had another, say, 20 or 30 countries that they had conquered, and they became a part of the Soviet bloc.
Right.
They called it the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR.
Right.
And so the current regime under Putin, they want to recreate that same footprint. Have all of those countries under the sphere of the Russian Federation.
Mr. Hare, I'm not trying to really go to. I'm hoping that you may go to this real quick, since we're talking about countries that things that could affect us. But I'm wondering, we had something really happen with China just recently, and I'm wondering if you might be able to speak on that. They said almost like put a line in the sand, and it was something dealing with Thailand.
Or Taiwan. Right.
Taiwan.
What they've done is it's not something that they did that was illegal. The airspace around Taiwan is Chinese airspace. It's not Taiwanese airspace. Mm-hmm. It's Chinese airspace. Taiwan is a part of the People's Republic of China.
Okay.
They have a different governance structure in Taiwan than they have with the rest of China, but they have a different governance structure in Hong Kong. They have a different governing structure in Sing Sing. So this is not unusual, for the Russians to have an economic system, a social system that governs 90% of the country, but in 5 or 10% of the country, you have parts of China that are governed differently. That's just the way it is in China. Mm-hmm. So, the Taiwanese, however, get upset when the Chinese fly military aircraft over what the Taiwanese consider to be Taiwanese airspace.
Okay.
They get upset about that. So that's not our biggest issue. The threat is that China will at some point attack Taiwan rather than try to negotiate politically to make Taiwan be a part of the rest of China and roll the same way the rest of China rolls. If Taiwan isn't willing to come under that kind of governorship, the possibility exists that China will just attack Taiwan the same way that Russia attacked Ukraine.
Yes, sir.
So that's the threat, that exists. Because if that occurs, that's going to involve all of the Pacific Coast Asian nations are now going to be pulled into a sphere of war where they got to figure out who's going to be on whose side. Go ahead.
I just want to ask you, now you taught us just recently about a particular thing that Barack Obama had formulated, and for some reason it wasn't talked about or brought about with him, but then Trump came in and got this to happen, and it was and now the Chinese are particularly running this Pacific Rim.
It was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Okay.
And as you know, you got this huge economy of the Pacific Rim countries. Mm-hmm. Pacific Rim countries would be the United States, on the west side of the Pacific, South America on the west side of the Pacific, but going further to the east, you got Australia, at the southern part. You got, Australia would be the Indonesian side, but Australia considers itself to be a part of the Pacific Rim grouping. But then you got, Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Indonesia and Malaysia, and then of course the Koreas, the two Koreas. You got China, Mongolia, right? And so you've got maybe 40% of the economy of the world is on this Pacific Rim. So Barack Obama had negotiated a deal where the United States would become the principal player setting the rules,
right,
and the relationships, so that folks, at least that's what they were going to say, there had to be a certain minimum amount of pay. People got to work in those enterprises, that people had certain standards they had to meet in terms of the quality of the goods and services that they produced, and so on. Taxation, how taxes were collected and distributed and so on. That's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership was orchestrating. But it would have made the United States a driver of that commerce. We lost that because Donald Trump said, well, that's what that black president did, that Barack Obama did. We're not going to do anything that he did. So they threw that out. Oh, we got 2 minutes. So they threw that out and replaced it. Trump never replaced it with anything. So the Pacific Rim countries developed their own partnership that has China now in the mix. China was not in the mix before.
Right.
They're in the mix now. So listen, you took up all my time for Ukraine.
I'm sorry, Mr.
So
Hare.
it's okay. So let's just talk about why Trump isn't funding co-conspirators. Trump's venture into social media with the creation of the Truth Social could come to a screeching halt in the near future if the merger with Digital World collapses and he faces ending up with nothing from the deal that has been pending for 2 years. Trump was trying to create a deal with this company called Digital World that they would wind up becoming the owners of Truth Social, Trump's website. And that would put a lot of money, it would turn his website into money for Trump. Right. And Trump is cash poor. So he wants, a couple $100 million from Digital World. But Digital World is not willing to spend the money unless they see a valuation of Truth Social that looks like it would be worth Digital World's a while. So according to a new report from the Washington Post, there's a September 8th, this is September 4th. There's a September 8th deadline for the merger to close or to be extended, and should it fail, Digital World will be compelled by law to return $300 million to investors. In other words, they had recruited investments, but if the company does not get created, then the people would have put up money to invest in something that doesn't exist. Digital World would have to give that money back. They don't want to do that.
No.
Right.
The Post, Drew Harwell, is reporting with the $300 million Digital World had already raised from investors, Trump's media and technology group, which is the creator of the pro-Trump social network called Truth Social, pledged that the merger would create a tech titan worth $875 million at the start and would eventually go to $1.7 billion in evaluation. So Digital thought they were going to spend $300 million, and 3 or 4 years from now, they were going to have an asset that's going to be worth $1.7 billion. But it doesn't look like that's going to turn out to be the case. 2 years later, the deal could be a catastrophic threat. The report notes the past 2 years have been chaotic. Executive partners, accusations of insider trading, and an $18 million settlement over accusations that executives misled investors and the SEC. Digital World needs 65% of the shares held by its 400,000 investors to vote yes on the deadline for an extension. If the extension fails, Digital World said in a filing in July that it would cease all operations except for the purpose of winding down and paying off investors at a price of something like $10.24 per share. Trump would retain his 90% ownership of Trump Media if the deal falls apart. It says Trump Social has already attracted, Trump Social has attracted a meager following, and through Trump Media, though Trump Media projected a 2021 investor presentation that the site would have 41 million users by the end of the year, usage estimates from SimilarWeb, a data firm that analyzes web traffic, suggests it is a long way from reaching that goal. Trump is about to go bankrupt.
Wow.
That's what this is talking about.
Yeah.
So, a lot of stuff, we try to get through for today. I'm not trying to scare everybody. I'm just trying to get us to all wake up.
Now you ended things on a great note here.
So, thank you all for listening to us and supporting us. We look forward to talking to you all on Wednesday. Happy Labor Day. We'll see you all on Wednesday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you all then.